Hey all, wanted to do a quick video tutorial on Cisco Wireless Access Point Controller registration using the Microsoft Windows DHCP server. Basically configuring scopes where access points would live so that these access points can effectively find a wireless LAN controller, as lightweight wireless access points really aren't much good to us without their connectivity to a controller. So we're going to talk specifically about how these access points connect to a controller or find a controller address. It can happen a number of different ways via DNS, broadcast, DHCP, and others. However, most all that out of scope. I want to again be very specific to the configuration within the Microsoft Windows DHCP server. This assumes you already have a working DHCP server. Installing the DHCP as a service and authorizing it with Active Directory, those types of things are out of scope. You can see in the background here, I already have my server up and I've created a scope. Network engineers can cringe, as it is, of course, the 192.168.0.0 subnet, and I've given it the name for wireless access points. What we'll be doing here is working with vendor class identifiers. So Cisco access points will use a vendor class identifier that's based off the model of the access point to be able to get the proper IP address of a controller. So within the Windows DHCP server, we can set up our vendor class identifiers with the proper identifier for a specific Cisco wireless access point model, and then that in turn will return a specific IP address to that access point. So why per model? Well, I guess the one easy answer is if I'm going through an upgrade where I've got some older model access points on a controller running some older code, and I'm going to upgrade to newer model access points on a different controller running newer code, maybe the support isn't there across the board for the older access points and the newer access points and different things like that. At the end of the day, we want to be able to tell the newer access points to go to the newer controller, and if for whatever reason one of the older access points came online or we had to replace one of those, they would still find their older controller. This lets us still have all the access points live in the same subnet, but use different controller discovery IP addresses. So that being said, to create vendor class identifiers for Cisco, each model has its own vendor class identifier. I'll post the link to this Cisco article in the video when I publish it, but this article gives the access point models on the left and the relevant vendor class identifier on the right. It's important to omit, of course, the subnote numbers behind. So in this tutorial, we're going to use the 3700 series access point as our target model to set up. So again, Cisco, capital C, space, capital AP, space, lowercase c, 3700 is the vendor class identifier that we will need to create. So the very first step within the Microsoft server is to create that scope or create that vendor class identifier. That happens if I click on the IPv4, right click, and here define vendor classes. There are, of course, the defaults here. I am going to add a new one, which of course is here. Now I can give this a name. I'll call it Cisco 3700 access point, and I can of course give it the same description if I want. These fields are arbitrary. The field that is pertinent is this ASCII field down here. Now it would be great if I could just copy and paste from the article that I had, but for whatever reason Windows won't let you paste into this ASCII field. So I have to type it, Cisco space, capital AP. Now here this gets a little confusing. You notice it jumped to the next line. I still need the space C3700. I hit OK. Okay, so that created my vendor class identifier for the 3700. Let's go ahead and just create one for the 3600 series AP as well. So Cisco 3600 series, oops, no, access point. We'll do the same here. Of course, I copied it over, so I can just change this and this. Here again, Cisco space AP. Of course, it jumps me to the new line. I need my space. C3600. Hit OK. So now I've created both of these. Once I create the vendor class identifier, then I need to set them as predefined options, which we can now see here in the drop-down. So for the 3700, I'm going to choose the option class, and then I'm going to click Add. And again, name is arbitrary, Cisco 3700 access point. And then I'm going to choose an IP address. And I can either choose an array or not an array, I guess. The array will allow me to provide multiple IP addresses in this case if I choose it, whereas unchecking the box will only allow me to put in one address. I typically just choose the array, and that way if I need multiples later, I can add multiples later if I have more than one controller IP I want to specify. Here, the code 241. That's the one to remember here. And again, I'll just throw this in the description field. I'll hit OK. I'll go ahead and do the same with the 3600. IP address 241. Hit OK. Now, I can choose here to edit the array and provide these IP addresses right here. If I do that, it makes them the default for every scope that I create. So I typically leave this blank and choose to assign these directly to the scope itself, as that gives me the most flexibility. So once I've created those, now under my scope options, you can see I've got a normal address scope here, right? My pool is 1 through 254, so a 24-bit scope. I'm excluding 1 through 10. Down in the options, I've created the default gateway at .1, some DNS servers, a domain name, and now I'm going to add additional options. So the ones we've created are going to be found on the Advanced tab, and of course here in the drop-down, I can choose my 3700 access point, check the box, and here is where I would enter a controller IP address. Now, the make and model of the access point and the controller IP is something obviously your network engineer, your wireless network engineer who is working on this is going to provide you. So let's go ahead and say my controller IP address is 192.168.69.251. If I had multiples, I could of course add a second and a third in here. In this case, I'm not going to. I'll hit apply. Additionally, if I wanted to set something up for the 3600 series access point, let's say we wanted it to go to a different controller. Here, we'll say it goes to 252. Apply and OK. And at this point, we're done. Once somebody plugs in access points, puts them into the relative VLAN, and they start requesting IP addresses from this server, these options, specific options, will go back and the access point will look at them and at that point reach out to that controller to join. Thanks all for watching. Hopefully this has been helpful.